On April 12th, we have a full moon in the sign of Libra. Let's have a quick chat about the general horoscope for this full moon, and then we'll get into each of the 12 zodiac signs. A full moon always represents a culmination of our previous actions. This could mean that if we acted out of alignment or with intentions that weren't coming from the right place, that we might see some negative consequences or manifestations. On the other hand, if we have been throwing the seeds of hard work, the seeds of good intention, during a full moon, we might also see some wonderful benefits coming from our hard work. Because this is a full moon in the sign of Libra, these manifestations have to do with our need for harmony, serenity, and our need to be able to coexist with others. This could mean that perhaps there is an area in your life in which you tried very hard to create peace with a person or with a specific environment. There is an area where you tried very hard to be diplomatic, to be kind, to be considerate, to compromise, and you might see some positive consequences come out of that. Perhaps your relationship becomes even stronger. Perhaps, if this is in your career, perhaps you see a promotion come through because of these relationships that you've been cultivating, because of this harmony that you've been trying to create. On the other hand, the archetype of Libra, when we reach its shadow side, can tend to forget what it wants for itself and can focus too much on others, focus too much on compromise. So if that has been you, then you might see some manifestations or consequences coming from that. Maybe you have compromised too much with your friends and you see something come about during this full moon that makes you aware of that and makes you aware that something has to change. When we go into the zodiac signs in just a minute, we'll get more specific into what area of your life this might be. But hopefully that gives you a nice overview of what this full moon in Libra is all about. The moon on April 12th, 11th to 13th, actually, I would say, is a slow moving moon. It's moving a bit slower than usual. And as a result of these manifestations or consequences that you're reaping, you might find yourself a little bit more guarded, a little bit less easy to trust others, and you might feel like you want to just take a second to sort of think things through before you act. However, don't be afraid of taking actions. Venus goes direct on this same day during the full moon, which definitely signals to us that all of the lessons we've been learning about relationships, about relating, around beauty and harmony, now it's time to start taking some actions around it. So it's okay if you feel like you want to think things through before you act, but don't hold back. Venus is direct, so it's time to implement some of the things you learned. And one more thing that I will add before we go into each of the 12 zodiac signs is that the moon is in the decan ruled by Mercury. Therefore, if you feel like you're not ready to take actions yet, you're still thinking things through, see if maybe you're able to take actions with your words and your communication first. Sometimes we might forget about that. Sometimes we might think of the most drastic measure, like I need to cut this person out, or I need to stop dating this person, or I need to tell my boss to F off. But see if with this moon in the decan ruled by Mercury, if you are able to already start setting things in the right direction just by using your words in the meantime, and then when you're ready, you can take some bigger actions if that's needed. All right, now let's go through each of the 12 zodiac signs so you know a little bit more specifically what area of your life this might manifest in. For Aries rising or Aries sun signs, this full moon takes place in your 7th house of relationships. So there is definitely a larger relationship theme for you with this full moon. Remember, the Libran archetype is about peace and harmony, and in the shadow side, about compromise. So see for yourself where on the spectrum you fall. Have you been too compromising with your partner to the extent where you feel like there's no longer you in the relationship? Or on the other hand, maybe you have been really thoughtful, really diplomatic with sharing something that makes the other person vulnerable or feel insecure. And as a result of your peaceful approach, as a result of your diplomatic, kind approach, you're actually able to reap a stronger, more connected partnership. For Taurus risings and Taurus sun signs, the full moon takes place in your 6th house of your daily habits, your daily routine. When we think about the Libra full moon, we think of a spectrum between seeking beauty and harmony or compromising too much. So see for yourself where on the spectrum you land. Have you been perhaps compromising with your diet because of, the person that you live with eats a different diet? Maybe you've really wanted to switch it up. You've wanted to go vegan, for example. During this full moon, if you've been compromising, you will see some negative consequences come about. Perhaps you are fed up with it and finally speak up. Perhaps your partner goes so far that they say something mean about all vegans, and that really deeply hurts you. And we don't have to get into such extremes, but it could happen that you see that negative consequence by the doctor saying, hey, your cholesterol is too high. You really need to switch to a more plant-based diet. On the other hand, it could be that you have been trying to seek that serenity and harmony in your daily routine. Perhaps instead of going to difficult workout class with loud music, you've been trying to cultivate more gentle mindfulness into your daily routine. You might see some positive consequences of that. Maybe your doctor telling you some good news about your health. For Gemini risings and Gemini sun signs, this full moon takes place in your 5th house. As we mentioned in the general horoscope, think about the spectrum of Libra, all the way from seeking harmony, serenity, beauty, to the other end, which is compromising too much and losing yourself. When it comes to dating, have you perhaps been way too focused on the other person and you find your boundaries being overstepped, or you find yourself just not having fun at all when it comes to dating? Or have you been only focusing on the hobbies that your friends want to do, that they are inviting you to, and have you forgotten to actually get in touch with how it is that you want to spend your leisure time? And on the other side of the spectrum, perhaps you have been really trying to find for yourself that serenity, that harmony with your leisure time. Perhaps instead of going to the bar and getting drunk, you've been going to art museums, or you've been going to music concerts. You might find some beautiful, positive manifestations from that. Perhaps you meet somebody at one of these events that feels more aligned and brings more purpose and beautiful connection into your life. For Cancer risings and Cancer sun signs, the full moon takes place in your 4th house, which means that on April 12th, you are reaping consequences when it comes to your home and family. Think of that spectrum when it comes to Libra, either compromising too much or being able to focus on cultivating harmony, serenity, beauty, while also keeping track of your own values and your own individuality. Where do you land on that spectrum? Perhaps you have lost yourself to your familial expectations to the point where you don't know who you are anymore. Or maybe you have focused so much on creating a serene, diplomatic, kind home environment that the people that you live with feel like they're walking on eggshells, feel like they cannot actually speak what's truly on their mind. Or on the other side of the spectrum, maybe you have been giving and connecting with your family in a meaningful, intentional manner, maybe focusing on how you can bring that sense of peace and harmony to them as well. You might see that positively manifest for you. You might find that your time with your family feels really rejuvenating and really wholesome. For Leo risings and Leo sun signs, the full moon on April 12th takes place in your third house of communication. This means that depending on where you stand in this Libran spectrum, you will seek some consequences. If you have been too soft, too diplomatic with your words, you might find around the full moon that your boundaries are being overstepped, that perhaps you are losing some responsibility, some power, you're losing a sense of agency. Or on the other side of the spectrum, if you have been thoughtful, intentional, diplomatic with your words, you might find that that's rewarded in some way. Perhaps you've been able to negotiate you've been able to win a really tough negotiation, and you've been able to secure a deal based on these thoughtful, diplomatic words and communication. So really see for yourself where in that spectrum you stand. For Virgo risings and Virgo sun signs, the Libran full moon takes place in your second house, which means that you are reaping financial consequences. This could manifest in two different ways. Firstly, if you have been diplomatic, intentional, loving, kind with your finances, perhaps you have used those finances to help bring some peace into somebody else's life, then you might see that positively return to you. Perhaps that person is now better off and has been able to return what you gave to them tenfold. Or on the other side of the spectrum, maybe you have been compromising too much with your finances. Perhaps helping people financially because you feel like it's your duty, but not because you really want to. Or because it's what you think they expect of you, or you're afraid they'll get angry if you don't do it. During this full moon, you might find that you are reaping some consequences. Perhaps there is no more money left for you. Perhaps you find out on this day that your debt is a lot bigger than you'd originally thought. For Libra risings and Libra sun signs, the full moon in Libra, your sign, is happening in your first house. This means that on April 12th, you'll be reaping benefits or what's the other side of benefits? Consequences, negative consequences, especially when it comes to how you present yourself to the world or the way you carry yourself. If you have been acting as if you have no backbone, if you have been too afraid to stand up for what you actually believe, you might see some manifestations come out of that. Maybe something happens with your friends or at your work or with your family that makes you realize that nobody takes you seriously. Nobody sees you as your own individual, as an individual that matters, as an individual that's allowed to have opinions and take space. Or on the other side of the spectrum, if you have been using your wonderful gifts to seek harmony, balance, peace, beauty, and you've been carrying that in the way you present yourself in the world. You've been allowing that to shine from you in the way you speak, in the way you dress, in the way you walk. You will see positive manifestations. Perhaps one of your friend groups ends up really trusting you in some major way, or you get some more opportunities to showcase these beautiful skills that you have. For Scorpio risings and Scorpio sun signs, this full moon takes place in your 12th house. This means that on April 12th, you will be seeking consequences when it comes to your spiritual routine. Remember that spectrum we talked about in the general horoscope between being too compromising versus focusing on harmony, peace, serenity with just the right amount, making sure that you are also remembering your own ideas, your own opinions. Have you, well, first of all, ask yourself where on that spectrum you stand. And some of the questions that you might see popping up on the one side of the spectrum, have you perhaps been too diplomatically correct when it comes to your spiritual routine? Have you not told people that actually with your spiritual practice, you practice a more controversial type of meditation, a meditation that's not accepted? Perhaps you find boxing to be therapeutic and spiritual, and you've been maybe afraid to share that with others. You might see some consequences come out of that compromise. Or on the other side of the spectrum, perhaps you have been connecting with the right people. You've been really making sure that in your spiritual community that you have been focusing on cultivating meaningful, thoughtful, kind relationships. You might find that there's a positive manifestation. Maybe one of those connections shares an insight that really changes you for the better. Maybe they connect you to a spiritual teacher and start leading you down an even better and more powerful spiritual path. For Sagittarius risings and Sagittarius sun signs, the full moon on April 12th happens in your 11th house of friends, of future plans and goals. On the Libran spectrum, you need to ask yourself where you stand. On the one side, we have compromising too much. Perhaps you have forgotten to actually share with this group, with these friends, what you stand for, what you believe in. If you're on that side of the spectrum, you might find during the full moon that there's some negative consequence. Perhaps your boundaries get overstepped. Perhaps the group ends up working on something, spending time on something that you really morally and ethically don't agree with. Or if you stand on the other side of the spectrum, where you've been seeking peace, serenity, harmony with your group, you might find that on April 12th, there's a positive manifestation coming about. Perhaps one of those groups or one of those friends introduces you to another one of their friends who helps you in some way with one of the ambitions that you have, one of the goals that you have. Maybe the kindness that you've been giving to this friend or this group somehow manifests positively and your relationship becomes more deep, more thoughtful, more meaningful. For Capricorn, both rising and sun sign, the full moon on April 12th will show you some consequences when it comes to your career. If you have been not having a backbone in your career, if you have been not really sharing your opinion and what you think because you've been afraid to stir the boat, you might see some negative consequences come about. You might see yourself being passed up for promotion, for example. Or on the other side of the spectrum, if you have been really honing in these wonderful, diplomatic, kind, harmonic communication skills that you have in your career, you might see some positive reinforcements come from that. Maybe it is you who gets the promotion. Or, if it's not about a promotion, it could be that you get, more responsibilities or you feel more recognized, more appreciated at your work. For Aquarius risings and Aquarius sun signs, the Libra full moon takes place in your 9th house. This means that you're reaping consequences when it comes to the law system, when it comes to travel or education. Perhaps you have chosen to study something that is not too challenging because you thought, I need a break, I need some peace, I need some quiet. You might find during this full moon that you reap some consequences of that. Maybe you feel stuck, maybe you get a failing grade, you see that your lack of passion for what you're studying is actually having an influence on your grades. Or it could be that perhaps you have used your relationships, you have used your savvy, smooth communication skills to help you get out of a sticky law situation. Maybe you knew just the right person who could move some things in the right way for you. Or, when it comes to travel, maybe you're compromising too much. Maybe you agreed with another person to go to one location instead of another, not because you wanted to, but because you were just too afraid to make them angry. You will see some consequences because of that. You might find that all of a sudden the plans get canceled and you cannot go to the holiday. You might find that things continue to go further and further down the road to the point where it feels like so many boundaries are being overstepped for you when it comes to this holiday that it doesn't even sound fun anymore. It literally, the whole thing sounds like a chore. And finally, let's close off with Pisces for both rising and sun signs. Pisces, this full moon is happening in your 8th house. This means that you're reaping consequences when it comes to intimacy and vulnerability. Perhaps you have been too compromising in your intimate relationships to the point where during this full moon, something happens that really oversteps your boundaries and you just can't take it anymore. Or on the other side of the spectrum, maybe you have been talking to somebody very close to you, sharing in a way that's sort of a bit held back, in a way that's still kind, in a way that's still maybe diplomatic and proper. And the other person might feel like they actually don't know you. They actually feel like you're not saying the deep stuff that you really want to say, that you're sort of showing a mask to them. Or again, if you find yourself that, you've been able to express something that's deep, something that's dark, something that perhaps could anger the other person, but you've done it in this kind Libran way, you've worded it in a way that's still loving, that's still gentle, you might find that has really positive consequences. That the other person and that bond with that other person is much closer, much tighter, and you have a much more meaningful connection. So those are all of the horoscopes for this Libran full moon on April 12th. I hope you enjoy the full moon. Don't forget that I do post full moon and new moon meditations for every full moon and new moon. I'll link the one that I did for this Libra full moon right here. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon.